broadcast is part of the IC Robots radio network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia-related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.
Adrift in the great void of space, the personnel on Moonbase Alpha have experienced so much that is strange and inexplicable. They have become accustomed to expecting the unexpected.
Paul, did you hear that?
Hear what? I don't hear anything unusual.
Welcome to the audio handbook of the Marvel Universe, a character-by-character look at the coolest heroes and villains that Marvel Comics has to offer. You can thank us later. For now, just listen.
All right, Cool Breeze, we are back for another exciting episode of the audio handbook of the Marvel Universe, the show in which we take a look at some of the coolest heroes and villains that Marvel Comics has to offer through the lens of the seminal 1980s comic book guide, the Handbook of the Marvel Universe. Let me light that incense. Let me bang that gong. Let me get ready for the Prince of Darkness himself, Count Dracula.
You're listening to IC Robots Radio.
So kids, we are back. This is the main crux of the show, the audio handbook of the Marvel Universe, where we use the seminal 1980s Marvel comic guide known as the Handbook of the Marvel Universe to take a in-depth look at some of the dudes who are out there that are worth looking at. And this week, we have a spooky wookie spectacular about Marvel Comics, Count Dracula. Count Dracula has been a mainstay of the Marvel Universe. Marvel has had great success using public domain type characters, such as the Greek gods. Hercules has been an Avenger, and Ares has been an Avenger, and of course, you got the Norse gods like Thor and Odin, and then other public domain style characters such as Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Werewolf, zombies, and of course, the subject of this episode, Count Dracula. Dracula is, of course, the famous Count Dracula, Vlad Tepes himself, and he appears in the guide. I only have the really big guide. I don't have the issue with Dracula himself, but he appears between Dormammu, he was the villain in the Doctor Strange movie. He's like the giant face. And then on the other side, you have a page about alien races. That includes the Dire race and the Druffs. The Druffs are weird looking. They are small and all fuzzy with a weird face. What a name. The Druff. Let's see. The Druff they were actually taken over and conquered by the Skrulls. So, sucks to be a Druff. Huh. It says right here that the Druffs are timid creatures with no more than a childlike intelligence and are easily tyrannized by the Skrulls. So, those Skrulls are creeps. We knew that all along. You can't trust a Skrull. The problem is you don't know who the Skrulls are, so you kind of, I don't know, man, creates paranoia. You can't trust anybody. That's what happened in that whole secret invasion gimmick. Let's get into some of the pertinence for the mysterious Lord of the Vampires. Dracula's real name is Vlad Tepes Dracula. Occupation is that of a nobleman. That is a fop of a career if I ever heard one. His legal status is that of a Transylvanian citizen who has been presumed dead. So he has pretty much a clear identity. He can go out there and he can do what he wants. His identity is publicly known, though generally disbelieved. His current identity is the Lord of the Vampires, and his former alias is Vlad the Impaler. He was born in Schauschburg, Transylvania, which is now in Romania. He is married, and he has a few known relatives. There was Vlad Dracul, who is his father. His mother's name was Maria. He has a son named Vlad Tepulus, a daughter named Lilith, a wife he was separated from named Domini, a son named Janus who was unborn, stillborn, super sad. I don't know why they put that in here. And Radu Dracula, the brother of Dracula himself, Radu Dracula. There are probably some interesting stories out there to be told about the dude he's the brother of Dracula. He didn't go into his brother's business, the business of professional blood drainage. He's into normal stuff, construction, handyman stuff around the house, that kind of thing. But having the Dracula name on the side of the truck does not help as much as you would expect. He kind of went with like the spooky Dracula motif for the construction business, and it just did not take off like he thought it would. I see him like in a black and maybe orange van rather, with some kind of a logo on the side, like a spooky Dracula logo, like Rudy in smaller letters, but like Dracula and like spooky, maybe like dripping blood red letters, and then a logo that's like some kind of vampire teeth. He thinks he's playing off the family name, and he is, and this is probably the best thing he could do, but people aren't too keen on hiring him because they don't know if he is also like a vampire. They're not really sure, and if you're not sure if somebody's a vampire or not, it may not be worth the risk to let them in your house, because you know how it is. Once you invite a vampire in, they can always come in, but if you don't ever invite them in, they gotta stay out. Let's get back to good old Count Dracula. Dracula is not affiliated with any groups. He operates out of Transylvania. Of course he does. And he first appeared in Tomb of Dracula, #1. We'll talk about that toward the end of the show. Let's take a quick peek at his origin. Vlad Dracula was born in 1430, the son of a Transylvanian nobleman. While still in adolescence, he was embroiled in the war against the Turks, but emerged from it with not only a practical knowledge of warfare, but a classical education as well. So this guy, being a nobleman, was pushed like right into officer candidacy school, I would imagine. And while other dudes were out there getting shot with muskets or like run through with spears or whatever they were using, having boiling oil poured on them, tar. I don't know what dudes did back then, but while dudes were out there doing that, he was probably off at the military academy, learning strategies, moving pieces around a big map, that kind of thing, drinking tea, reading books, but it's all good in the hood. Let's get back to the, let me move the guide. Let me move the guide in this direction. This is a big book. This is a big paperback book. When he was about 30, he was felled in battle by a Turkish warlord named Tarak, who took him to a gypsy, Leanda, to be healed. Leanda was a vampire, and in her care, Dracula became one as well. Dracula soon confronted Nimrod I, Lord of the Vampires, and he defeated him, earning for the first time leadership over the undead. He expelled the Turks from Transylvanian borders, and then Dracula set up a kingdom ruled totally by fear of vampires. This is when the story starts to get interesting, and I feel like they may be glossing over a bunch of different things here. So he becomes a military leader, and then in battle he gets attacked by one of his own dudes who mistakes him for a Turk. They hate these Turks, and what he does is he takes him to a nurse or a doctor, a healer, a shaman in the Transylvanian village. But it turns out this lady's a vampire, and the only way she could heal our boy, the nobleman fop warrior, Dracula, is she bites him, turns him into one. It's a bit different, but it works. If it came down to it, and this is real talk, if it came down to it and they're like, I see robots, this is it, you're gonna die unless we turn you into a vampire. I'm gonna become a vampire, dude. I'm not ready to exit this plane just quite yet. When you see vampire fiction or vampire stories, the vampires are hesitant to turn people. They're hesitant to turn their friends because they don't want them to lead the sad life of a vampire that they've had. And when I see this, I always think, just because your experiences are one way does not necessarily mean that my experiences will be the same way. Just because you're a miserable dude who has a miserable time being immortal, being a vampire, doesn't mean that I will. I'm not saying that I want to become one, but I think that if I did become one, I would make the best of it. The downside is you can't go out during the day. That's okay. I would just just go out at night. I would go move to somewhere with a better nightlife than here, and I would live at night. Is this so bad, living at night, that you're supposed to end your life instead of do it? I think that's weird because a lot of people work at night and they may not be necessarily as ecstatic as the people who work during the day per se, but they lead fulfilling lives. They work at night. It's not a big deal. Some people work at night. Some people work during the day. It's not worth giving up your life over. But then he becomes a vampire, and this guy, he has a thirst for power. He has a thirst for blood and a thirst for power. So he goes after this dingleberry named Nimrod. The leader of all the vampires is named Nimrod, and he takes this fool out, and he becomes the leader of the vampires. And the first thing he does is he throws all the Turks out of the country. He just straight up performs some kind of racism, some kind of ism. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was some genocide involved in here. This guy's not the best dude we've ever met, so he's evil from the start. He gets to power. First thing he does, kills some other guy, becomes a beast. Second thing he does, throws a bunch of innocent people out. The next thing he does after that, he makes everybody in his country bow down and fear his vampire power. Not a cool guy, if you ask me. Not one of history's great men. Let us continue on in the tale of Dracula. Eventually, Dracula was seized with wanderlust and began over the next few centuries to explore and depredate Europe and eventually America. It was around the mid-1550s when Dracula met death for the first times at the hands of Puritan adventurer Solomon Kane. Eventually revived by his followers, Dracula continued his vampiric life up until the present day, interrupted only by short periods of death when his enemies succeed in killing him. Killings in quotes. Thanks to the popularity of the novel by Bram Stoker, based on true events that occurred in 1890, the general populace believed Dracula and all vampires to be fictitious. That's like that gimmick from Usual Suspects, where they're like, the best thing the devil ever did was convince people he wasn't real. That's what that book did for Dracula. Good job, Bram Stoker. You probably led to the death of like tons and tons of dudes, because there would be more active vampire hunters out there than just like Solomon Kane and Abigail Whistler and Blade. If people knew that this was a real problem, thanks, man. You suppressed all of the evidence. So Dracula dies, like people run him through with a stake, and then they throw him back into his coffin and go, that's it for him. But then eventually, like his followers, the people who were way into him, I imagine these are like goth kids and stuff like that. These fools who were all into Dracula, they find him, they dig him up, pull the stake out, and there you go. Dracula's back to life. Let me grab the guide here, because the powers of Dracula, this is the most fascinatingly interesting part to me. I love how they go and they quantify something like the actual powers and what it takes to become a vampire. Let's see. Dracula is 6'5", 220. He's tall, very tall and lean. His eyes are red and his hair is black. That is one tall, spooky drink of water. As a vampire, Dracula possesses a host of supernatural powers of a mystic nature. Vampirism is a disease whose supernatural origin is not known, which causes those stricken with it to die, and after death become physically transformed into pseudo-living creatures who need the blood of others to sustain its existence. The bite of a vampire, the means by which most vampires procure fresh blood, deposits an enzyme found in the vampire's saliva in the bloodstream of the victim. If the vampire draws enough blood to cause the victim to die, the enzyme triggers a metabolic change in the victim's body, beginning with the production of a greenish liquid called ichor in the bloodstream. In approximately 3 days, there is sufficient ichor to nourish the victim's vital organs in the same manner that blood once did. The victim, now a vampire, him or herself, is capable of all the basic functions of life, except for procreation. That's not how they do it. They do it by biting. Plus a number of other supernatural feats, such as transforming into a bat. If the victim's blood loss is not severe enough to cause death, the victim will show signs of anemia because of effects of the enzyme in his or her blood, but they will not die. Until the enzyme is fully metabolized, which can take anywhere from 2 weeks to several months, the victim will be weak and sickly, as well as susceptible to any of the vampire's commands. So they can bite on you and draw some blood and put the ichor into you, and the ichor will cause you to be weak and almost zombie-like to the suggestions of your vampire master. Virtually all vampires are able to mystically transform themselves into bats within the first night of vampiric life. Virtually all vampires are able to mesmerize human beings through eye contact within the first month or so. Most vampires gain superhuman strength anywhere from 10 to 20 times their normal mortal strength. Dracula has mastered certain other vampiric disciplines over his 500 years of life. He's able to summon thunderstorms, although the mystical concentration does leave him quite drained. He can summon and control certain wild creatures like bats, wolves, and rats, as well as mystically transform into somewhat semblances of them. He is able to transform himself at will into mist, which makes him invulnerable to all projectiles, and Dracula also possesses sufficient powers of mesmerism that he can make any lesser mind his slave. He only needs to catch their gaze for 3 seconds. Let's quickly dip into some of the weaknesses of Dracula and some of the ways we can murk him if we have to. Vampires have several limitations upon their supernatural powers in existence. The first is their all-consuming craving for blood. Unless a vampire drinks approximately 1 quart of fresh blood every night, it will weaken and perish. Some vampires of greater power, like Dracula, are able to resist their bloodlust for greater periods of time, sometimes up to a week. Vampires cannot travel for more than 100 miles from the place they were born unless they have taken along at least 1 pound of their native soil. So that's interesting to me, where you were born, not where you returned, where you were born. So for me, I was born in Illinois, so I'd have to have some Illinois dirt, even though I haven't been there for a long time. Due to the vampire's altered metabolism, sunlight causes the ichor to congeal in the vampire's veins, and the skin will rapidly decay. Direct exposure causes a vampire to completely dehydrate and turn to powder. Vampires have a mystical aversion to garlic. The wearing of at least 1 clove around one's neck is sufficient to ward off a vampire. Vampires also have an aversion to any religious artifacts, such as a cross, a star, holy water, etc., wielded or placed by anyone who believes in the spirit that the objects signify. So you have to believe. You can't just stick a cross in vampire's face. You gotta be like, I believe in the power, and stick it in there, and then he'll begin to burn. You can even burn his skin. Although vampires are able to change shape to escape injury, there are a number of things they are vulnerable to. Because they are no longer alive, the process of cellular regeneration no longer occurs, hence, penetration wounds will not heal, nor will severed limbs grow back. So, if you get the chance, chop off a vampire's arm. Chop off his head. They can't do much about that. Let's take a quick Dracula commercial break, and we shall be back in, 45 seconds.
Master?
Quiet, I'm calculating.
Isn't it dark in there?
Not for my new Anilite solar calculator from Texas Instruments.
You have a Texas instrument?
Texas Instruments Anilite calculator. Unlike other solar calculators, it works in almost
Any light.
good and feel.
The new line of Anilite solar calculators from Texas Instruments.
Imagine the Prince of Darkness with a solar calculator.
Yoki doke, and we are back. We're back for the final segment here. We've learned a lot about Dracula. We've learned what he can do, what he can't do, where he came from, how much he hates Turks. We've learned he has a brother named Rudy. Let's hop onto eBay, and we are going to see what the first appearance of Dracula in the Marvel Universe, a comic known as Tomb of Dracula #1. This came out in April of 1972. Let's go to some of the solds. That gives you an idea of what people are actually willing to pay. Here is one that sold, but it also includes number 2 and 3 as well. You get 1, 2, and 3 of Tomb of Dracula. That went for $61 with free shipping. It was an auction. There were 71 bids. That is for all 3. I cannot... Oh, here's one. Somebody bought a very nice copy of Tomb of Dracula #1, which has a cover by Neil Adams, the great Neil Adams. $65. This isn't like a hot-selling comic, because I'm strolling through here, and I'm not seeing a ton of solds. The one that you want is Tomb of Dracula #10, which is the first appearance of Blade. I love Blade. The The Blade series is one of my favorite things Marvel movies has ever done. I realize they're not like Marvel Studios, but when I say that, I mean like of all the Marvel movies, like X-Men, Avengers, just the entire thing. The Blade series is one of my favorite. I think Blade 2 is just a terrific movie, but the appearance of Blade first is number 10. I said that all out of order, and somebody sold one here for $200. Right now, if you wanted to, you could hop on, and here's a buy it now for $59.99 if you wanted to get it. Here's an auction that's just started, a low opening bid of $4.99. I know that there has been a Marvel Legend of Dracula that was fairly recent, as I recall. Let's see what you can own that for if you are so interested. Back in the day, there was a Marvel Legends set. This is not the Marvel Legends that we know now. This is the old Marvel Legends. There was a box set of Marvel monsters. You can get Dracula, you could get Frankenstein, Werewolf, and the Zombie. If you wanted to, you could pick that up, still in the box on eBay for $120. What year did that come out? I am not sure. Let's do a bit more research into that, and we'll find out. The set is, we are still kind of zipping around here. This was back in the day. I really recall seeing this at a Toys R Us, and in retrospect, I wish that I would have bought it. I liked it a lot. And let's see, release date. That is I am boring you to death with this. I don't know why I'm still looking around. What's a good Marvel Legends site? I don't really have one myself. I wish I did, but I do not. MarvelLegends.net. I'm gonna poke around here and see if I can find out the info. Let's see, Dracula. Why do they have a Google search on here? That's a bit goofy. Marvel Legends checklist. Marvel Legends checklist. Series 1, Series 2. This is a thrilling podcast stuff right now, isn't it? Hearing me flip through a Marvel Legends website, trying to find out the release year of the Marvel Legends Monster Gift Pack, and we now know May 2006. Take that! I did eventually win. This is a beautiful set. Tomb of Dracula, Frankenstein's ugly werewolf, and the living zombie is grotesque. I want to get this, but I don't want to spend the $100 that it's going to take. It appears there was also a mini-mate of Dracula. It comes in a 4-set called Curse of the Mutants, and you get Blade, Vampire Jubilee, Vampire Wolverine, and Dracula. There's also a Hero Click. You can get that for 99 cents. The mini-mates, though, they're going to cost you like $30. There was a Sideshow exclusive Polystone diorama of Blade and Dracula. That's kind of neat. Overall, I don't know. Dracula is not necessarily like a property that Marvel's focusing on. They use him. They have some, they've had some success with these public domain type characters, and they continue to, do so today. So I guess that's about it. I mean, we've learned about Dracula. We've learned about comic Dracula. We've learned about a few toys based upon Marvel Dracula. So far, this has been the spookiest episode of the audio handbook of the Marvel Universe to date, and that's something I take great pride in. So, for me, for Dracula, for Blade, for Solomon Kane, for Abigail Whistler, for everyone out there who loves and hates Dracula, I'm signing off. This is the audio handbook of the Marvel Universe. Gonna power down. Until next time, make my Marvel.
This has been an IC Robots Radio production.